one question, and ask you again on this side to come around. You mentioned presidential leadership and your advisor to the Obama administration. The Los Angeles Times recently wrote an editorial saying that President Obama has been a bit of a disappointment on environment issues. He didn't deliver a climate bill. He has done some things on invest in light and high-speed rail and increased auto efficiency standards. How would you assess how well the Obama administration has done on energy so far?
Well, I would say that if the Obama administration did what it wanted to do, what President Obama wants it to do, that we would have done all the things that I just talked about. The problem is that our democracy is broken. The press is broken in this country. We have 30% of Americans now getting their information from talk radio, which is 95% controlled by the right. We have 22% getting their news from Fox News. And we have we have our campaign finance system, which is just a system of legalized bribery, has just been opened by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Citizens United case, which is the most disastrous opinion. You know, H.L. Mencken said that a journalist is somebody who can't distinguish between a bicycle accident and the end of civilization. Well, the Citizens United case is the end of civilization, the end of democracy. We have a 100-year-old law that said corporations cannot contribute to federal political candidates or office holders. And the Supreme Court just wiped that out, and we have a tsunami of corporate wealth that is now flooding into the political process and is going to dictate the direction of this country rather than the republic and the democracy. And that is a catastrophe for our country, and Obama has run up against that wall. You know, he passed it through Congress, but you have a Senate that essentially are a group of corporate toadies for coal and oil. They're the carbon cronies. And that's, you know, they're representing their interests rather than the interests of the American people. And, you know, Obama, it's not fair to, you know, to say Obama has failed when, you know, the same thing with his health care. He's running up against pharmaceutical industry. And the pharmaceutical industry has under its control all of the news organizations. 70% of advertising on network news now comes from pharmaceutical companies. Do you think that they're actually going to control, that they're going to support something that damages their interest? The rest of advertising is coming from the automobile industries and the oil industries. The reason that Air America failed was not because they didn't have listeners. They had more listeners. They were beating Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh in every market. They were the #1 radio station in Republican, in San Diego, for example. It was a Republican town. And so it wasn't listeners, it wasn't the hunger for progressive talk, it was that they could not get advertising. They were advertising, you know, hair products and penis enlargement and, you know, and these gold scam companies. You know, because they couldn't get national advertisers because they were boycotted by the pharmaceutical industry, the oil industry, the coal industry, and the auto and you know, oil, coal, all of the major national advertisers, and you know, that happened because the abolition of the Fairness Doctrine by Ronald Reagan in 1988, where, you know, the media no longer has the obligation to serve the public interest. They're now serving their shareholders' interest, and they do that not by telling us the issues that we need to understand to make rational decisions in a democracy, but rather by entertaining us. So we're today, you know, by appealing to the prurient interest that all of us have in the reptilian core of our brains for sex and celebrity gossip. So we know a lot about Charlie Sheen, and we know a lot about Britney Spears' gradual, you know, emotional decline. Well, we know very little about what's happening in Appalachia or about, you know, about global warming or the things we need to know. We're the best entertained and least informed people on the face of the earth, and we cannot keep our international leadership or our democracy if we don't have an informed public that is capable of recognizing all the milestones of tyranny and telling the truth from fiction. You know, in Canada, they don't allow lying on television. It's illegal on the television news to lie. That's why Fox News is not in Canada. And that's why the Canadians didn't follow us into Iraq, into an 800-year-old fist fight in Mesopotamia where Dick Cheney was saying, oh yeah, they're going to meet us with flowers in the streets. the Canadians were saying, "Are you crazy?" Because they weren't listening to Fox News, and the devolution of the American media and the lack of campaign finance, those are two legs of the three-legged stool of democracy that have folded in our country. And anybody who looks at American democracy can see we are in worse trouble now than we've ever been since the Gilded Age, when this country was owned by corporations. And we have to understand this, that when business is controlled by government, it's called communism. When government is controlled by business, it's called fascism. And our job is to walk that narrow trail in between, keep big government at bay with our left hand, big business at bay with our right, and walk that narrow trail, which is free market capitalism and democracy. And in order to do that, we need a working press that is sophisticated, that is aggressive, and is determined to tell us the truth about issues. And we need an informed public that can recognize the milestones of tyranny. And we don't have that anymore in the United States of America.
Our guest today at the Commonwealth Club is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let's have an audience question, please.
As much incentives for entrepreneurship, and that we should have as least regulation as possible. But you need a certain amount of regulation to protect the commons, to protect public health, and then the rest of it should be just sensibleness. If you put something out there that hurts people, we ought to be able to sue you for it and impose, punitive damages if we show that you did it recklessly or knowingly. And we had those laws, but they're being dismantled now in this country because of the corporate control of our democracy. We have the most right-wing Supreme Court we've had in American history. This is not right-wing in terms of conservatism. There's no coherent conservative philosophy that governs this Supreme Court. Scalia, Edwards, Roberts, and Thomas. My partner was a clerk to the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. He reads every decision. He's one of the smartest attorneys I know, and that's a very, very hard job to get unless you're really smart. He's a lot smarter than I am. But he goes through every decision. He said there's only one coherent philosophy with those five justices. And it's not a conservative philosophy. The philosophy is this, and you can see in the last 3 days, the three big decisions that came to this court are so absurdly transparent of this philosophy. And that philosophy is that corporations always win. If it's a corporation against the individual, the corporation wins. If it's government against an individual, the government wins. If it's corporations against the government, the corporation wins. Tell me one single decision by those five justices that differs from that philosophy. That's not conservatism. That is corporate control of our democracy. Teddy Roosevelt said that the greatest threat to American democracy would never be an outside enemy, but rather malefactors of great wealth who would steal our democracy from within. Dwight Eisenhower, another Republican, warned Americans that the greatest threat, he warned Americans against the domination by the military-industrial complex, which is now part of our culture and part of our daily lives. Another Republican, Abraham Lincoln, the greatest Republican in history, said during the height of World War II, the height of the Civil War, I have the South in front of me, I have the bankers behind me, and for my country, I fear the bankers more. And Franklin Roosevelt said in World War II that the domination of government by corporate power is, quote, the essence of fascism. And Benito Mussolini, who had an insider's view of that process, said the same thing. He said he complained that fascism should not be called fascism, it should be called corporatism, because it was the merger of state and corporate power. And what we have to understand in our country is that you hear the teabaggers saying that big government is the big threat to our democracy, but unsheathed corporate power is an even larger threat. And we need what we need if we're going to save the environment, number one, is to get our democracy back. Thank you all very much for having me.
Our thanks to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for his comments here today at Climate One at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Greg Dalton. Thank you all for coming.